I think the Brewers shop both Burns and Adames, try to get the best, package they can get for both of those guys. I've seen, some reports suggesting that maybe one team like the Dodgers could do a 2 for X number player package. I'm sure the Brewers would be interested in that, and start the rebuilding process.
Hey, Setup Nation, excited to come to you with the very first episode of Rumor Has It. This is going to be covering all 30 MLB teams during this hot stove season. And our very first guest, Todd Rosiak with the Milwaukee Brewers. He's a beat reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And man, Todd, what a great first episode here, because it seems like the Brewers are the talk of the town when it comes to the hot stove already this offseason, and maybe not for the best reason in Milwaukee, but I mean, you guys have just had a ton going on. I'm sure you've got a busy offseason so far.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, 14 years now, covering the Brewers, and easily the busiest offseason I've experienced. And in my 31 years in the newspaper, I think this is also qualifying as my busiest offseason. It's just been really nonstop since the end of the season, when the Brewers got dumped in the wild card round, and it just got crazier, of course, with the Craig Counsell stuff. Last week was getting Pat Murphy in place, so now hopefully we've got about a little less than a 2-week window here to kind of catch our breath before the winter meetings start. But knowing the Brewers and just kind of guesstimating what'll happen, I'm would not be surprised in the least if there's another couple trades in the offing before we all get down to Nashville to kick off the hot stove.
Yeah, winter meetings coming up, and just to get everyone kind of caught up, right? You guys were 92-70 this year, NL Central champs, swept by the Diamondbacks though in the NLDS, but this was the 5th out of 6 years for playoff appearances, and really just kind of crazy with the whole Counsell thing. And I know a lot of people have been talking it to death, but I just want to hear from your perspective, especially being a guy, I'm sure, that had built a relationship with Counsell. How does it feel with him going to the Cubs?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I started covering him when he was still playing for the Brewers. So yeah, I have been around him for a while, and he's always been a guy that has kept his intentions and his motives very close to the vest. And if we look back to the start of, about this time last year, maybe going to January, everybody knew that he was entering that lame duck status as manager with one, in the final year of his contract. And if you go back and you look, he didn't talk about it much. He's very, very reticent to address the topic, but anytime he did discuss it, again, kept everything very close to the vest, never really went into any detail, didn't really say much of anything other than, I'm just happy with the Brewers right now, and I'm just letting it play out, and we'll see what happens from there. That really should have been our first clue that something might have been in the offing. And, people, once the season finished and the Mets stuff started picking up steam, I didn't really see that as a very good fit. Counsell to the Mets just did not make much sense to me. I think everybody, including myself, figured that at some point in time, the two sides, Mark Atanasio, the team owner, and Craig Counsell, would come together on a number, and he would be back. But that fateful day, 2 weeks ago today, I believe, fateful day where everything started popping, and we hear that the Mets are hiring Carlos Mendoza, and then Cleveland a little while after that hired Stephen Vogt, and then it was Craig Counsell is going to be going to a team that already has a manager, and then it's the Cubs of all teams. It was just an incredible unfolding of circumstances, and needless to say, it was not received well in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. He's gone from a guy who, really, could have written his own ticket the rest of his life here. Wisconsin lifer, Milwaukee area lifer for the most part, to persona non grata, really.
Yeah.
There's a small percentage of people here who, I think, and rightfully so, are grateful for the time that he did give the organization, because he really was an important piece of what has happened here over the last 9 years, getting the Brewers back to respectability again. But to go to the Cubs of all teams, it's I would say it's a cardinal sin in the eyes of many. So now that he's departed, I think everybody is wishing the worst on him, as fans will often do. And the 14 or 15 times, whatever it is, these teams will play every season moving forward now are going to be incredibly intense.
Yeah,
it's going to be crazy. I mean, the games are always intense anyway, but you throw council into the mix now too, and it's going to be really, really insane. So if for nothing else, it's created a tremendous storyline for fans and for media both.
Yeah, well, the storyline, right, is really what I think catches everyone's attention already, because it was just, and you heard about it, right? November 1st, Jed Hoyer hadn't even talked to Craig Counsell at that point, and it seemed like it all came together so last minute that it was just such a, whiplash for everyone. But I think you nailed on the head, right? Like, that's a cardinal sin going to the Cubs. I couldn't believe it. Low key, I am a Cubs fan, but I still was like, whoa. That like, yeah, I'm excited about Craig Counsell, but at the same time, like, if I was a Brewers fan, I would not be very happy about that. But Pat Murphy now in the seat. Have you gotten to know Pat very much with him being the bench coach for the last few years?
Yeah, obviously he's been around. He was Counsell's bench coach for all but the first year of Counsell's managerial stint here. So he definitely cuts a very different presence than Craig Counsell did. Craig, pretty quiet guy for the most part. Pat, on the other hand, is loud, boisterous, can be obnoxious in a good way at times. Is not afraid to give people a hard time, including the media. He showed that in his introductory press conference already. So for those of us who deal with the manager twice a day, every day during the baseball season, it's going to be quite a change going from his student to the teacher, from Craig Counsell to Pat Murphy. I'm going to be interested to see how, in particular, the young players take to Pat Murphy, because he can be a kind of a hard charging guy. He has no problems getting in a player's face, and that was not Craig Counsell's style. So the Brewers valued continuity in this hire more than anything, which is why Pat Murphy's getting his first chance at a full-time managerial role in the majors almost at age 65, which is really an interesting story in and of itself. But again, in a season coming up in 2024 that is going to have no shortage of interesting storylines, the Murphy thing to me too is going to be right up near the top of the list.
Well, and that's good insight to know that, because, from a fan's perspective, I look at these moves and then I see Brandon Woodruff, let go, and I see Rowdy Tellez not coming back. And I think to myself, well, this feels like a rebuild. This feels like young guys coming up, but you're saying that, Murphy can kind of be a little bit intimidating. Do you see it the same way from the fans' perspective, that this is maybe the start of a rebuild, or do you think this team is still going to try to be competitive in 2024?
I think the story is really going to be told over the next 2 weeks, and then coming out of the winter meetings. Right now they've got really two guys that I would pinpoint as the determining factor whether they're going to go rebuild or not, and that's Corbin Burnes and Willy Adames, two guys who no chance of re-signing in Milwaukee after this coming season. They're going to be making too much money, and the Brewers want to stay competitive as much as possible. But I have a hard time believing that they look at their roster right now, look at what they're going to be in the very near future, and think that by keeping Corbin Burnes and Willy Adames, competing for this coming season in 2024, at maybe the expense of bettering yourself for a longer period of time down the line, I think to me that signals a rebuild. So in my humble opinion, I think the Brewers shop both Burnes and Adames, try to get the best package they can get for both of those guys. I've seen some reports suggesting that maybe one team like the Dodgers could do a 2 for X number player package. I'm sure the Brewers would be interested in that, and start the rebuilding process. It's not a word that anybody likes, especially the Brewers, who if you look around the division, the Pirates have been in a perpetual rebuild and completely alienated their fan base. The Reds have been in an extended rebuild. Last year, they showed some signs of promise finally, but that's another franchise that really alienated its fan base. The Brewers are very cognizant of that, and they're very reliant on selling tickets, and they don't want, to have to go through this extended period of time where they're just not competitive. So if they can somehow make it to where it's going to be a shorter window, a 2-year process, something like that, I think that's more palatable. And they do have a lot of young, controllable talent, both just having reached the majors, Bryce Terang, Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, Joey Weimer, those kinds of guys. And then they've got obviously a really good farm system as well. I think we may see Jackson Churio at some point next season, one of the top 2 probably prospects in all of baseball. They've got some intriguing pitching coming through the pipeline, some very good position players as well. So if they do choose to go rebuild, I would expect them to try to bolster that farm system a little bit more, maybe pick up a few more younger controllable pieces on the major league side and see what happens.
Do you see there being any scenario where Jackson Churio breaks camp with the team?
No, that would be virtually impossible. And for a number of reasons. I mean, they're not going to come out and say it, but service time certainly would be one consideration. But also, this is a kid who's really had just a handful of games at the AAA level. And now he has proven the Brewers are always very aggressive with their top prospects in terms of moving them up the minor league ladder. And that hasn't been any different with Churio. He's answered the bell every single time, and certainly did not look out of place in his short little stint with AAA Nashville. But I would expect him to start the season in Nashville, at the very least, probably spend the first half there, and then maybe reconsider at that point. Other factors might come into consideration, injuries at the major league level. If Churio is just all of a sudden, tearing it up at AAA, then maybe you reconsider. But to me, that's probably a second half type addition if you're going to be looking at him getting to the major leagues.
One other guy I've seen in trade talks, potentially not as much as Adames and Burns, like you mentioned, but Devin Williams. That would be a tough one, I feel like, to stomach based on how dominant that guy has been for such a sure end of the back of the bullpen, especially since you guys lost Hader last year. I mean, do you think there's any truth to those rumors, or do you think that he sticks around?
They have 2 years of control left of him. So if somebody were to come to the Brewers and just knock their socks off with an offer, I think you have to consider it. And, they showed that they were willing to do that with Josh Hader, and they did it in the midst of a playoff run too, right. Which, making that move ultimately is what cost them getting to the playoffs that year. Devin Williams, one of the very best handful closers in baseball. We see what the prices are once these guys reach the open market. I was looking today. I see Josh Hader is, looking at a 5-year, $105 million contract or something like that. Just, insane money, something that the Brewers certainly wouldn't consider doing for a closer anyway. And they also have a guy on hand right now in Abner Uribe, who they feel can be their closer of the future. This is a kid who, can top out at 103, 104, one of the very hardest throwers in the game. He needs experience. He did get quite a bit of it last year and looked pretty good. So, if the Brewers do ultimately trade Devin Williams, I think they're pretty well positioned to kind of cushion that blow. And you're going to have your ups and downs with the young guy. There's no question about it. Uribe's control is something that's continuing to be a work in progress, but it's not like you're going back to square one. You've got a real candidate and a guy that could potentially be really good in that role moving forward.
So if I were to ask you today, only one guy is going to get traded, who's most likely in your eyes going to get traded? Is it going to be Burns? Is it going to be Adames? Or do you think they all stay?
Honestly, I think both Burns and Adames are destined to be traded. I don't see a scenario where one goes but the other one doesn't, if that makes sense. I think the interest is going to be huge in Corbin Burns. We all know that starting pitching is at a premium at the major league level. And, this is a guy that's 2 years removed from winning the Cy Young. His numbers have not been quite that good since, but he has something going for him, which every team covets, and that's health. He's taken the ball every single time for the last 3 years, and that's something that's pretty rare in the game, obviously. Willie Adames, his offensive numbers have kind of taken a tumble. He's going to drive in runs. He's going to hit home runs. His average has not been great. He's struck out a bunch, but he is a very good defensive shortstop as well, one of the 2 or 3 best in the game right now if you go by the analytics. So, if you're going to trade Corbin Burnes, you might as well trade Willie Adames, or vice versa. If you trade Adames first, you might as well trade Burnes and just start that process. If the Brewers do get rid of Adames, they've got a guy like Bryce Terang in the wings, who they think can be an everyday shortstop at the major league level. Certainly, like I said, with Abner Uribe, with any young guy, there's always going to be that learning curve and growing pains. Bryce Terang went through quite a few of those this past season, but there's a lot of promise there. So, fans of prospects, fans of young players, I would say tune in and watch Brewer games, because you're going to be seeing a lot of young, exciting faces coming through the pipeline here in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of new faces, one that is not new that to me was a little bit of a surprise, but I want to hear from you. Woodruff, was that expected from the team in your eyes, that they were going to let him go, or did you think that he had another chance to come back? I know he was owed $12 million, so that probably had a huge part to go into the decision.
Yeah, that was not a surprise in the very least. And what a bad set of circumstances, both for player and for team. Yeah. Brandon Woodruff, as I said earlier, I've been doing this for a long time, and Brandon Woodruff is on my short list in the top 5 of all the years that I've been covering baseball. Just quality human beings, great guy, great in the community, does anything the team asks of him, fan friendly, just like everything you want in a guy, in addition to a really good starting pitcher. And for him to go through what he did this season, he had that subscap strain that cost him 3 months, rehabs his butt off, comes back, pitching great. And then that last start in Miami at end of September, his velo dropped way down, and right away, the red flags start going up, like what's going on. And then, we all remember the tearful press conference going into the playoffs, where it was announced that he wasn't going to be able to pitch. And from there, it's just kind of been, it's like it was destined to happen. The Brewers just don't have that kind of money, to keep him around for a year and then, maybe sign him for a 2025, a make good deal, something like that. They could not get together on a number. Teams knew that the Brewers were in a tough spot, and they were probably more than likely going to non-tender him. So they're not really going to offer anything of value in trade. And as a result, the two parties had to part ways. I talked to Brandon Woodruff a couple of weeks ago, and he was fully aware of the situation, knows it's a business, but, made sure to say that, his preference was to stay in Milwaukee if it could at all happen. And, he cherished his time with the Brewers. So I know GM Matt Arnold said that it's not, even though he has been non-tendered, perhaps that there could be some way that they could come back and revisit this at a later time and bring him back. I don't know how likely that is. But I joke with Woodruff. I said, us media types, we'd be willing to chip in a little bit out of our measly paychecks to throw a little his way if that's what it takes to bring him back, because you can never have enough of those guys in the clubhouse who are just always friendly, open, willing to talk, and do it in a professional manner. And he certainly is right at the top of the list of those kind of guys.
So today, as we do this, we know that Woodruff's not coming back. We know that Tellez is not coming back. Of course, if Burnes and Adames go as well, there's going to be more holes to fill. But currently, as the roster stands, what are some free agents out there that you kind of look at and say, hey, those could be some good filler pieces, especially during a rebuild or a potential rebuild that might just be, 1-2 year contracts to fill in some spots for now?
Honestly, it's way too early to start throwing names out there, just basically because we haven't seen the market set yet. We really have not seen any of those dominoes kind of fall. So I think it's kind of what happens in most off seasons is you get the big names signed, and then you start working your way down from there. What the Brewers have really excelled at, in addition to making trades kind of a year ahead of time, everybody looked back last year and said, why did the Brewers trade Hunter Renfroe for 3 lottery tickets? And we see how it turned out. It doesn't always turn out this way, but the Brewers got a guy in that 3-player deal, Elvis Peguero, who turned out to be a really, really good 7th inning guy with the potential to be an 8th or a 9th inning guy down the line. Hunter Renfroe bounced from team to team to team and ultimately was DFA'd. So the Brewers are always thinking ahead of the curve, almost like the Tampa Bay Rays in that respect. And it's not a mistake because Matt Arnold came up in the Tampa Bay Rays system. So that's kind of how his mind works. And, with the smaller budget, you have to think outside the box. So to me, I think the Brewers are going to be looking at more of those types of deals, trying to be ahead of the curve, trying to pick up young, controllable talent. And then once the dust kind of clears and the market is settled, and that's taken the trade stuff out of the way, the Burns and the Adames thing, potentially trading them. But once the market is kind of settled, the dust is cleared, and you have this group of players that's left still looking for jobs, that's where the Brewers do some of their best work. They move in, and right before spring training starts, they'll sign 2, 3, 4 of those guys, maybe a pitcher or two, a reliever, a couple position players, and then hope they catch lightning in a bottle. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. Last year, you think back to some of the names they signed. They signed Justin Wilson, didn't work. Signed Tyler Naquin, didn't work. Signed Luke Voigt, worked for a couple of weeks, and then he was gone. So it's just, kind of hit or miss, but that's what they like to do, is just hit the bargain bin. And again, I know fans don't particularly like that, but they have had a lot of success doing that in the past. So I don't see any reason to think that they're going to deviate from that process again.
Cool. Last question. You mentioned that fans should get used to seeing a lot of new and young faces. Who's someone that we didn't talk about that's coming through the system, or maybe only got a few at bats or a few innings to pitch this year that you're looking forward to seeing more of in 2024?
For me, the real story and the thing that's going to be most important for this team is after, having moved past this class of homegrown talent in Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta, it was really a once in a generation type rotation. You want to look at kind of that next generation of starting pitching. And the Brewers have a couple guys, really 3 guys in the system right now that I would say probably 2 of them have a really good chance of being in the majors this year. The third, perhaps. The names are Jacob Mizorowski, Robert Gasser, and Carlos Rodriguez. Mizorowski, he was a 2nd-round pick of the Brewers a couple years ago. Just incredible flamethrower. Anybody who follows prospects knows the name. He was in the futures game this year, throwing 103 miles an hour. And he's a guy that they believe can be a starting pitcher. Time will tell on that. His command is still a little iffy, but he's got just a world-class arm, incredible fastball, and some other really good ancillary stuff. So he's a name to watch for sure. I think the guy out of that group right there that is going to make a real immediate impact is Gasser. He's one of the guys that the Brewers got back in the Josh Hader trade in August of 22. I would not be surprised if he is in the starting rotation on opening day. Left-handed strike thrower, big sweeping slider. Again, if he can dial in the command a little bit more, he's a guy that's going to strike out 7, 8, 9 guys in 5, 6 innings and give you quality starts most times out. And then the third name is Carlos Rodriguez. He's a guy who came out of junior college a few years ago. And just kind of more of an anonymous guy, kitchen sink arsenal. He pitched in pool play in Team Nicaragua's opener in the World Baseball Classic this past spring and did really well, belying his age. He was only 21 at the time, and he'll start the year at AAA Nashville this year. He's another guy too that I think could factor in as time goes on. So, to me, the Brewers are in a pretty good position with the position players, but if they can get even 2 of those pitchers to really click and stick in that rotation moving forward, they should be in really good shape.
Well, they've been good the last decade at making sure a lot of those prospects turn out to be something. So looking forward to seeing what they have this year. Todd, anything else happening behind the scenes that I didn't ask about that you want to share?
Really the only other thing that pops to mind is I'm going to be interested to watch the interplay between Pat Murphy and his new associate manager, Ricky Weeks. Yeah, I think most baseball fans recognize that name. He was an all-star second baseman for the Brewers. one of the real good homegrown talents that the Brewers have brought along in the last 15 to 20 years, and a name that I think has surprised a lot of people because he wasn't even really involved in the background or the periphery of the major leagues just a couple of years ago. He came on as a pro personnel assistant, kind of learning the ropes through the front office and doing a little bit of scouting, a little bit of coaching with guys behind the scenes. And he's really burst into the forefront here. And I think if things go according to plan, if things go the way the Brewers hope they go, in several years, Ricky Weeks may be the next Brewer manager once Pat Murphy moves on, however that happens. Another homegrown guy, kind of in the mode of Craig Counsell, well-respected. Brewers fans have loved him. And so that's something that bears watching. Ricky Weeks kind of learned the ropes at the right hand of Pat Murphy, and we'll see where that takes them.
There you go. I was also surprised when I saw Ricky Weeks getting named, and not bench coach anymore, associate manager. I like how they changed the name of him.
Everybody's got a title now. They changed the title of a coach on the team. He was previously pitching, catching, and in-game planning coach, and is now his title has changed to run prevention coordinator or something like that. So it's just, I don't know if they're getting any more money with these titles, but they're certainly getting more creative.
Oh my gosh. Professional ice on the arm, man. Let's go for that next. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Todd Rosiak, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a look into the Brewers offseason. We appreciate you.
Yeah, you got it, Kyle. No problem. My pleasure.